and welcome to Lost in the Warp Episode 3. My name is Ethan, and this is my co-host Riley.
Hello.
And today we are back with another episode. I think today we're going to be talking about Assault Intercessors, both the ones marching up on foot and flying to the battlefield with a jump pack.
Spooky.
Yes, it's going to be a good time. We couldn't find an amazing quote for this one, so we're just going to skip right into the lore.
Yeah.
So if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so your Assault Intercessors are your close support Primaris Marines. We had a whole episode dedicated to your Intercessors, and they do things with shooties and all that. These guys get right up close and personal. If you've played Space Marine 2, this is like a huge chunk of the gameplay. Is your melee, your hacking and slashing. You might have a bolt pistol, but really it's all about getting in there, fighting off the nids or whoever.
And they're essentially just a specialized close-up personal fighter. Take your standard intercessor, swap out his bolt gun for a bolt pistol, and give him a massive chainsaw, and just set him loose in a flock of enemies and let him wreak havoc. Some of them, as we've mentioned, we talked about jump packs. Some of them can be equipped with these highly agile jump packs to increase their speed incredibly and make them just lightning fast mobile close support.
Yeah, and referencing Space Marine, because that's just big right now is the video game. You know the jump pack just allows for so much extra movement and ability to just cause problems for whatever enemies that these guys may be facing. So having that extra bit of mobility is massive.
And we'll get a little bit more into the jump pack later.
Yes.
But for now, Assault Intercessors, like your standard intercessor that we've talked about before, they wear the Mark 10 Tacticus armor. It's the heavy-duty power armor made of ceramite and plasteel with built-in servos for movement and HUD systems for battlefield awareness. We've talked about it a little bit before. If you want to have a little bit more of an in-depth look at it, go back to our episode 1 where we talked about intercessors. But it's roughly the same.
Yeah, same armor. These guys just have a different use on the battlefield. So, like Ethan just mentioned, we did a deep dive on the armor in our first episode. So if you are interested, take a look. These guys, in some cases, there's the jump pack, like we keep talking about. They use a variation of the Gravis jump pack, and that just, like we said, adds to the mobility in combat. It's not the same jump pack that Inceptors have. It's slightly altered so it fits on their Tacticus armor, but it's same purpose. Get up, cause problems, come back down, keep causing problems, have fun. You know, they're kind of just like crazy wild dudes that
Exactly.
have a good time.
Yeah. So let's move into the weapons a little bit. Their weapons don't really differ that much from your intercessors.
Mhm.
They use the same kind of things, although they have much more of a penchant for using chain swords.
Yeah.
And as we've kind of mentioned before, they swap out their bolt rifles for heavy bolt pistols and plasma pistols and take the fight to the enemy head on. So, like I just mentioned, we have the heavy bolt pistol. It's essentially a bolt pistol that has a longer barrel and it gives it a little bit of better range and can hit a little bit harder and from further away. You've also got the plasma pistol, which, again, we've talked about this before. Our favorite superheated ball of matter returns.
Yeah, I mean, every time we talk about anything plasma related, we just get giddy with joy. We're like little kids in a candy store because this thing is just so freaking cool.
I love my plasma.
Yeah, it's got the cartridge of superheated gas, and it's just contained in this little bubble. We still don't understand what all that means because it just atomizes and does things and makes things not exist anymore, and it's glorious.
Yeah.
So
the other ranged weapon option that a lot of Assault Intercessors are able to take is the hand flamer. We've already mentioned before our distaste for the hand flamer. I don't love it.
yeah,
But in the lore, it's just a hand-held flamer.
yeah.
So
No heavy flamer. That's at home. You get this little baby one because you got to be mobile. Okay?
Yeah.
It's for someone else. Your older brother in Gravis armor, he's carrying the chonky weapons. We're carrying the small things. Got to be light and agile and hack and slash a little bit more.
Yeah. And we'll get into it when we get into the tabletop. But I do actually like the idea of the hand flamer in the lore because it's like, well, we need to be fast and agile, but we still want to commit a war crime. So we have the hand flamer. It's your handheld flamethrower.
Yeah.
But again, we'll get to the tabletop later.
Yeah, like in lore, it makes sense because you're going to be zipping around the battlefield doing crazy things, and like one hand might be slashing through something, the other hand is turning those cultists into screaming balls of flame and continuing to move on. Like it makes sense in the lore. Now, when you're fighting against things with armor, flamer is not as good.
Yeah.
But we'll keep diving into things as we continue.
Yeah.
On the melee side of things, so here's the bread and butter of your assault intercessor: the chain sword. Brrr.
Yes.
it's it. This is a work of art. It's beautiful. We've talked about these before. It's got the monomolecular teeth. It keeps it just super sharp at all times and allows it to rip through armor really effectively. It is chainsaw strapped to sword. Chain sword.
It's one of the most iconic weapons from the Warhammer universe,
yeah.
and personally one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I think every faction, not necessarily every faction, but every Imperial faction has some variation of a chain sword, and even some non-Imperial factions have it too.
Yeah, and they'll change the name slightly. It'll be a little bit different. Like your Sisters of Battle have your Holy Eviscerator.
Exactly.
Like it ain't broke, so they haven't fixed it. They've just adjusted it to fit in different sized hands.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
I think in the lore of the chainsword is one of my favorite things to read about too, just because the way that the authors tend to describe how people die to chainswords.
It's pretty brutal.
It's so brutal. It's bloody and it's great. I think they do. It's one of the best parts of the grimdark universe of 40k is how well the chainsword fits that motif.
Oh yeah,
and with the assault intercessor, it especially fits because they're moving fast. They're taking chainswords to their enemy.
Yeah, 100%. Our next melee weapon is the Power Fist. Again, we've talked about this before. It fist, but bigger, with this energy disruption field that's kind of around it that allows it to just bonk things really hard. The armor has extra servos in it that make sure that it can smash and punch and crush really hard and keep the Space Marine inside intact, because you're putting a lot of force into something when you're punching it. And that's augmenting the strength, making sure you survive when you're hitting something that hard.
Yep. We also have power weapons like power swords. This is generally what your sergeants and above will carry in lore. It's more of an elite considered weapon. It essentially has that same power disruption field that surrounds the power fist, and it essentially allows it to slip through any like armor or anything and then penetrate deep.
Yes, yes. And our last big melee weapon option in the lore is the bonk stick, the thunder hammer, the doom mallet. My personal favorite. And chainsword is amazing, but I just like the crack stick. Heavy hitting weapon that just absolutely abuses things. It has that energy disruption field. You hear the crack of lightning when you hit things with it, and it is power fist on a stick, but having the stick just makes it feel so much better because you can whip that thing around.
There's a difference between punching something and then using extra leverage to punch
Oh
something.
yeah. Just making things disappear.
It's all in all, these weapons, assault intercessors put them to great use. I mean,
yeah, it really fits their purpose.
Yeah. Their motif very much is take the big weapons right up front and rip and tear.
Yes, 100%. So now we're going to move into war gear and talk about some of the things that they commonly take with them in the lore. Our first is grenades. So we've talked about these before. We have your crack grenades are your C4 shaped anti-armor type charge. They're your sticky grenade. You chuck them, stick to something, cause problems. Whereas your frag grenades, self-explanatory. It makes things into Swiss cheese. You have the shell of ceramic around an explosive core, makes a bunch of shrapnel, causes problems.
Yeah. I think the most important part of war gear for assault intercessors, though, is the jump packs that they're able to take.
Yes.
So, from the research that I was doing, jump packs are Dark Age technology. They don't. They understand how they work, but
Let's be honest. In the 41st millennium, does anyone understand how anything works? I mean, look at the AdMech. Like, they just light incense and hope. Like,
yeah.
and things keep working, praise be to the Omnissiah, but
They do still work.
yeah.
But essentially, it's a giant, bulky backpack that replaces the Space Marine's power pack. It doesn't replace it. It goes on top of it and
Mm,
kind of melds with it. And that's one of the big differences between the two types of assault intercessors. Is the power pack is part of this jump pack assembly.
yeah.
But it essentially allows them to have bursts of energy that allow them to move faster through terrain.
Yeah.
You can jump over hazardous terrain. You can move quickly through open fields.
Mm.
One important note, though, is these are not jetpacks. They're not actually flying. They are just maneuvering.
Yeah, you can't have sustained flight with these. You can have like the jump or the burst to navigate things. You can also jump up, hover for a split second, and immediately come back down and kind of move around. It's
Exactly.
not this sustained, hover fly around at all.
No, and that's a big difference that at least I didn't realize for a while. But yeah, you have the thrust vectoring jets on the back, and so a
Mhm.
lot of them have different fins and things to direct your motion of flight.
Yeah, yeah,
But you're essentially moving faster with a jump pack versus it just running on foot.
yeah.
It's to add to that extra lethality, that extra mobility.
Exactly. So, some fun facts about our assault intercessors is we were just talking about these. The jump pack intercessors usually deploy from gunships. So, they're kind of the gunships cruising over the battle and they're just jumping out and basically free falling into a mess. And they'll slow down a bit with that jump pack and then just absolutely cause problems. Unleash the chainsword, ruin someone's day or a lot of people's day. Kind of depends,
Yeah, I
and
think
it's glorious.
my favorite illustration of this is they weren't necessarily assault intercessors, but there's an animation on YouTube that somebody did for the Hell's Reach novel
Mhm.
where Grimaldus and his retinue have jump packs and they're jumping out of a Thunderhawk that's going down in Hell's Reach, and they're jumping out and gliding down with these jump packs through the hive city of Hell's Reach.
Yeah, and you also see some examples in like Space Marine 2.
Mhm.
There's a mission where it's not necessarily themed around assault intercessors or themed as coming out of a gunship, but the ability that it gives you to kind of control your descent as you're kind of diving through a bunch of wreckage and stuff in space. Like it again, not a jetpack, but it allows for more mobility and control over the direction you're going when you're in the air.
Exactly. It's for that maneuver element.
Yes.
I think this is my favorite fun fact. Assault intercessors are selected from the most aggressive Marines in their chapter. And then on top of that, jump pack assault intercessors are selected from the most aggressive out of them.
Well, yeah, it's their anger management program, you
So
know?
you take these already extremely aggressive, not necessarily reckless, they're still Space Marines,
Yeah.
but aggressive, more get up close and personal minded Space Marines, and they become assault intercessors. And then from them, the ones that are even more so get a jet strapped to their back
Yeah,
and go even faster.
you make it so they can be even more aggressive.
It's awesome. And this is
Yes.
very common in the White Scars and, as mentioned earlier, the Black Templars.
Mhm.
Those chapters that tend to favor speed over necessarily
Yeah.
like bulk and armor.
Speed and kind of the hand-to-hand up close combat.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, with that, I think it's time we dive into the tabletop and talk about, what all this stuff we talked about in the lore, how that plays out on the tabletop.
Yeah.
So, the first thing, and again, this is Space Marines. So, guess what the Army rule is? It's Oath of Moment. Oh my gosh, getting those rerolls.
Rerolls
Uh,
to hit are always nice.
yeah, it's super helpful. It's nothing spectacularly like special and unique. Like Space Marines or Space Marines or Space Marines, they're gonna do the same thing as far as Army rule goes. But it is a good Army rule.
It is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The composition of an assault intercessor squad is the same for jump pack or for the people on foot. There's one sergeant and then 4 to 9 assault intercessors.
Mhm.
The sergeant, as always, can swap out his heavy bolt pistol for a plasma pistol or a hand flamer. I'm not sure why you would do that for the hand flamer, but the plasma pistol can be nice.
Yes.
And the sergeant can also swap out his chainsword for a power fist, power weapon, or thunder hammer.
Yes. Yes. Good
Um,
options.
the points for these, when you're talking about on foot, they're actually cheaper than intercessors. Points on foot is 75 for 5 models or 150 for 10 models.
Hmm.
This is pretty good. I mean, you're getting raw melee power that's much better than your standard intercessor squad.
Yeah, you're getting a blender for a good price when it comes
Exactly.
to points.
And, 5 aren't necessarily going to be doing a ton, but 10 can definitely have an
Oh yeah,
impact.
definitely.
Similarly, jump pack intercessors are 90 points for 5 and then 160 for 10. So
That's really nice.
it's really interesting because usually you see they double the points
Hmm.
values, but instead 10 is actually you get a little bit of a discount for having those extra models,
Yeah, and that's nice. You're getting a lot of value out of that. And,
especially for the speed, and we'll get into it later,
mhm,
but their ability that comes with that when you have 10 of them is huge.
yeah.
Their stat line, it's an intercessor but angry.
Yes.
They the only real difference in their stat line from the basic intercessor, they have a standard 6-inch movement, 3 up save, 4 toughness,
Mhm.
and 6 up leadership. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
They have 2 wounds apiece. The only difference is when you get to the jump pack intercessors and they get a 12-inch move instead of 6-inch move.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, you
Mhm.
see it in the points, but it's one of those things where mobility means mobility. They're going to move, they're going to be quick, and if you have even just a 5, but especially a 10 block, you're going to move them quickly and tie something up and
Yeah.
prevent another unit from moving by just being a pain.
And this is where I think the jump pack intercessors really start to stand out
Mhm.
because they have the 12-inch movement, and that gives them such a massive bonus.
12 inches is a big movement.
Especially when you're in detachments like Gladius, where you can do advance and charge,
Mm.
because you can roll an advance roll, and even if you roll average, you get, like, say, a 4 on your advance roll, you're still moving 16 inches and still able to charge.
Yeah.
So that's going to be on turn 1. That's going to be pretty useful. You can close almost all of No Man's Land with that. If there's a target you really want dead, that
Mhm.
is not necessarily a super tough target, but something that you can easily take out with a lot of chain swords,
Yeah.
that amount of movement coupled with the ability that they have, really they hit like a truck and they do it quickly. And I think that's where they really start to jump ahead for me.
Oh, of course, of course. So on the tabletop for weapon options, first we're going to start with the ranged weapons. The heavy bolt pistol, it's a bolt pistol with a longer range and a little bit more AP, but it's a bolt pistol. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, they're going to be plinking shots no matter what, but they
yeah,
do still have an AP and they can't be discounted. I
yeah.
was playing a game very recently where they were Crusaders for Black Templars, but they're roughly equivalent. They do
Hmm.
kind of the same thing. Their abilities are different, but they have the same heavy bolt pistols and the same chain swords for the most part. And they popped, a unit of 10 shot at a demon prince that I was playing with, and I still lost a couple wounds because you're still putting
Yeah,
them on a 3 up save. If you get them through, which they had lethal and sustain, so they were going to get a couple through,
yeah.
you can still do a decent amount of work with them. You can
Hmm.
get plinking wounds where they might still be needed. And that demon prince went down in combat by 1 wound because he got those wounds through.
Yeah, I mean, one wound can make a massive difference.
Absolutely.
So the next weapon's the plasma pistol. Um, we've talked about this a lot. We love this. It's amazing.
Yeah, I
You,
don't think we can beat that dead horse too much
yeah.
more.
Just for the sake of a reminder, there's hazardous and then there's normal firing with it. Hazardous, higher strength, more damage. Use this option. You might have a guy explode, but it's so worth it.
It's so much fun. The only time that hazardous with the plasma pistol is a little bit iffy is when you have a special weapon on your sergeant.
Yeah.
Like, because it only is the sergeant that can carry the plasma weapon.
Yeah.
If he blows up and he had a thunder hammer and you were really counting on that thunder hammer, it does feel kind of bad. Again,
Yeah.
it's only a 1 in 6 chance, but
Yeah.
it's
It,
something you have to balance when you're choosing your
it's a
targets.
situational thing that you have to weigh out. 9 times out of 10, you're probably just gonna want to do hazardous.
Yeah. That being said, I always hazardous.
Oh yes. The next is hand flamer. No, don't do it.
It's
It's not really worth it. It's like it's good at killing light infantry, and that's about it. And it's not even amazing at that. You have better options. Again, this is only for your sergeant, so eh.
yeah.
You're going to be better off taking that heavy bolt pistol or the plasma pistol in almost every situation imaginable.
It just feels like instead of a normal flamer, which is, relatively good at barbecuing infantry,
Mhm.
the hand flamer just it feels subpar.
Yeah, and it in my mind, it's not even relevant for this unit because if you're gonna be worried about light infantry, charge in, blend them, use your chain
Yeah,
swords, be done, move on.
because more often than not, if you're running Assault Intercessors, you're probably going to be running them in a squad of 10. The
Hmm.
only time you run them in a squad of 5 is when you had, like, maybe you had 75 points to fill, or
Yeah,
maybe you just needed a small chaff unit. You didn't want to actually have a full block that was a
yeah,
threat. That's the only time you're really doing that. So if you don't, even then you're not taking a hand flamer
yeah.
because you're going to be more worried about having, shooting that has AP on it.
Mhm.
Even if it's only one shot, you're still more likely to do something with a heavy bolt pistol than you are with that hand flamer.
Yeah, yeah. So moving into the melee weapons, number one, chainsword, glorious, beautiful, the Emperor's divine creation. We love it. Anything to say else?
I want one.
Well, yeah, yeah. Might be illegal, but
Who cares?
we'll figure it out. Yeah, the chainsword's amazing.
Especially again, because this is their MO. Assault intercessors feel like the embodiment of what the chainsword was meant to do. They rush in and they rip and tear.
Yeah,
And especially in this kind of a unit where there's maybe 10 of them, that's a lot of attacks. If you have the
yeah,
full 10, if it's a full 10, you have 50 chainsword attacks.
yeah.
That, if you're combining that with Oath of Moment, you're probably going to get hit around 40 times.
Hmm.
That's not including, actually, you're probably going to get hit around 40 times no matter what. Then they re-roll, and now you're up to like 45.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you go to wound, and if you're anything that's not toughness 5 or higher, you're probably going to get wounded 25 or up times.
yeah.
And then you have that many saves at AP -1.
Needless to say, they're probably paced.
They're probably paced. It
Yeah,
just the amount of chainsword attacks, they feel like they might be a little bit piddly against higher targets, but when you have enough of them, weight of dice really makes a difference.
yeah. It's a beautiful weapon. It does amazing things, like having that one AP and just like you said, weight of dice. Not only is it fun to just have a massive handful of dice to throw at the table, but to just get things through. And like your use for the assault intercessor and their chainsword is killing infantry, but with that much to roll, you can probably go take on a good number of vehicles too.
Well, like I said, I've had multiple high value units go down to assault intercessor
Yeah.
or an equivalent in another like successor chapter. I've had armigers get turn 1 eliminated by charging assault intercessors. I've had a demon prince go down. It's just they can punch way above their weight
Uh-huh.
because they have so many dice.
Yeah. They're gross and I love it.
It's awesome.
So the next weapon's the Power Fist. This one, high strength, good AP and damage. It's a good bonk stick. Like, well, it's not the bonk stick, but it is a good it's a good weapon. Like, it's not fabulous, amazing, the best thing ever. You're only gonna have one of these.
Yeah, you only get one in the
So
unit. So it is another situation that
yeah,
we talked about with intercessors where it's a one off.
yeah,
So it doesn't feel great. But, having that extra one heavier weapon can still make a big
yeah.
difference.
It adds to your ability to you know charge into a tough vehicle and have a slightly bit more confidence and
Exactly.
this one might get through, whereas maybe you whiffed with all your chain swords, you can at least keep trying. you know
Exactly.
Next we have the power weapon. Fewer attacks than chain sword, but you got the more AP and you have more strength,
Yeah.
so
It
it's
again, it's okay. It's
yeah,
much better when you have more in the unit.
yeah,
Like blade guard power weapons do a lot of work because there's a lot of them, but when you
yes,
only have one, it kind of feels a little bit less effective.
yeah. And that's the big thing with a lot of these alternate weapon options. They're all one-offs, so it's not like this is going to make or break the unit.
Yeah.
It's just a chance. You choose based on what you want the unit to do, and you kind of just hope for the best.
Exactly. That being said, though, they are still impactful weapons when they do
Yes,
matter.
yes, it,
And I think this is kind of a common theme with Space Marines is they get and actually this is one thing that I do think they do really well for tabletop to lore is sergeants actually matter because they have a better weapon.
yeah,
And in the lore, sergeants actually matter because they have better weapons and they're more experienced.
Yeah,
So
100%.
it does actually feel like something that works very well tabletop to lore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's just I have a lot of experience where Sergeant has big fancy weapon. I roll dice, it does nothing, and I'm like, wow, big fancy weapon useless. So
Yeah.
I may be biased and feel like it's irrelevant. It's just another weapon, but it is a good point. Like
Well, that's
having the
fair.
more powerful weapon does like even if it's just one, it can make an impact based on the utility you're having it for.
Exactly.
And talking about utility, the Thunder Hammer. Oh boy, howdy. Power Fist hits on fours, so not as amazing, but dev wounds.
You do love your dev wounds from the
Yes,
Thunder
yes.
Hammer.
Oh, it's glorious, beautiful.
I love it. And yeah, it is a one-off, but I always will take the one-off in these kinds of units just
Yeah,
because even if it's not guaranteed to do a lot, you're still gonna throw a Hail Mary at the end of the game if you need to win.
yeah. It just keeps
So
things interesting, keeps it a little more entertaining.
exactly,
It's fun.
it adds a little bit of something that you can really use to spice up the game and
Mm-hmm.
potentially get that extra wound through where you need it.
100%.
Like chainsword only is damage one, but when you're going up against more beefy enemies that have 2 wounds apiece, your chainsword's a little bit limited. That's where your power fist, that's where your thunderhammer
Yeah,
comes in handy, and it's nice to actually have those. Maybe use those to get a little bit of a degrade on the enemy before you go in with the chainswords.
yeah, yeah.
So now it's time to talk about the abilities, and at least for me, this is where the assault intercessors really pull ahead of the intercessors
Oh yeah.
because on foot they have the ability Shock Assault, which is in melee reroll ones to wound, and if the enemy unit is in range of an objective, reroll the wound roll instead.
It's so beautiful.
It's
It
good, especially when you're paired with Oath of Moment and you're targeting something that's on an objective, because that's full rerolls to hit and wound.
Mhm.
You take your chances of getting something through from pretty okay to really good.
Yeah. I mean, their whole thing is do melee, make it quick, be brutal, and especially on an objective, which going back to just Space Marine things in general, you're either taking or holding objectives.
That is their job.
That's their thing. And when you throw these guys at an objective on the tabletop, oh boy howdy are they gonna do what they can to clear that thing.
Yeah. I mean, they may not be the best at holding the ground, but they will do a lot to take it.
Yeah.
The only things that they can't shift are things like tanks.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to be sending your guys with chainswords in to deal with tanks normally, especially not in lore. They're going to,
Well, I would.
well,
But I'm proven to be kind of dumb sometimes. So
but I don't know. This feels really flavorful and nice.
yeah,
And
it's a good ability for especially like the ground unit version. This feels good. It feels
Mhm.
right.
And it does even give them the ability to hit something that's a little bit tougher
Mm-hmm.
because they have re-rolling their wound roll if they're on the range of an objective. Potentially, you can do a good job, and even re-rolling ones can be really impactful.
Yes. When
So,
you're rolling 50 dice, you're gonna have some ones.
yeah,
So the ability for the jump pack assault intercessors is Hammer of Wrath.
this one is my favorite, and this one honestly puts the assault jump pack intercessors above even the on foot ones for
Oh
me,
yeah.
just because of how good this ability is.
Yeah. So after charging, select one enemy unit in engagement range. Roll a d6 for each model in the intercessor unit in engagement range of the enemy. For every 4 up, the enemy takes a mortal wound. Oh.
When you have a block of 10 and you charge in and you're able to get everyone in engagement range, this does work.
Yeah.
If any of you have ever watched other YouTube channels like Play on Tabletop, for example, they
Mhm.
had their King of the Colosseum event.
Yep.
One of the lists that did extremely well, I can't remember the win streak that they had, was the White Scars, and they had one or two squads of assault intercessors with jump packs, and they would fly around dealing out Hammer of Wrath damage, and they did a lot of work. Doing
Yeah.
those mortal wounds was one of the biggest pieces that had success for that list. So it really just
Well, in this, it provides so much utility because you can take this into a vehicle. You're not worried about hitting, you're worrying about the dice being a 4 up.
yeah.
You have a 50% chance to throw out mortals, possibly up to 10. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and I mean, this really brings their ability to do damage to vehicles into just another level because you're gonna be
Yeah.
getting weight of dice through, and you may get, a couple wounds from that. But when you've done 4 mortal wounds already, it feels a lot better when you've probably bracketed something or
Oh
you've,
yeah.
maybe even destroyed a lighter vehicle just from
Yeah.
getting plink damage through.
I mean, it's like kind of like tank shock. Softening something up
Hmm.
before you really get into the fight is amazing. And for
Well,
this, you don't even have to spend a CP.
Well, and here's the other thing. I don't know necessarily how legal this is, but I've seen it done on battle reports, and there's other different ways you can do it. But essentially, what you do is you have 2 enemy units that you really want to hit.
Mhm.
You charge one of them that's weaker. You use this ability to do the mortal wounds to wipe them out,
Mhm.
and then you pile into the other unit. I
Oh,
believe you have to actually base the other unit first before you can like completely pile in.
yeah, but if they're close together and you line up your models right so they don't get like
Exactly.
battle shocked and run off.
That's that was why I'm not sure about the legality of it. I'm not sure exactly how the combo works,
Yeah,
but piling it just on the charge because those mortal wounds are allocated in the charge phase.
yeah,
They're not allocated in the fight phase. So you do those mortal wounds in the charge phase, then you move over, you pile in to start the fight phase, do all of your attacks into the other enemy unit, and depending on how things go, you could pick up 2 units.
holy cow. Okay, that's gross.
Yeah,
I love it.
it's amazing.
Don't do this against me, please.
I don't have assault intercessors with jump packs, so you don't have to worry about it.
Thank God.
I'm
Okay,
not buying a bunch of models just to do this to you.
I wouldn't put it past you. Okay. Yeah, so abilities for the tabletop are very good.
These are on point. I think these are the best abilities we've seen so far in our
Yeah,
analysis. I
they
mean, we
they
haven't done a
fit
lot of
well.
analysis,
Yeah,
but this is the best. I think this is not necessarily the gold standard, but this is about as good as it gets for
yeah,
abilities
it's nice.
representing the lore.
Mhm. So now we're gonna move into our comparison. We've talked about lore, we've talked about tabletop, and we're gonna see how things stack up. So for armor, uh, suffers the same issues as normal intercessors, like not as tanky as you think they should be. It's a genetically enhanced super soldier, and they're just like, 2 wounds. Meh. You
Which,
know,
I mean, in terms of game balancing, it makes a lot of
yeah.
sense.
And that we always come back to like for game balance, yes, that makes sense. For game matching lore, eh,
It's, yeah, game matching lore, it doesn't really quite live up to what it should.
yeah. The,
But, and I think this is where the jump pack saves the jump intercessor specifically
yeah.
because it makes up for that low wound count, that low toughness, by allowing them to move quickly and get where they need to go before they're even able to be shot.
Yeah, they're not gonna get blown out of the sky really early. I mean,
Exactly.
they always could be, but they're they have a fighting chance to get in and do the work they're meant to do
Exactly.
before they get shot off the table,
Because
which is
Overwatch is
nice.
always a threat. You
Yeah.
can always be shot in your own movement phase,
Hmm.
but having the jump pack specifically, it really offsets that. I think the normal on foot one assault intercessors still struggle a little bit. I
Yeah.
think that you definitely have to play them a little bit smarter
Mhm.
because otherwise they're just going to get shot off the board,
Yeah.
and you don't want that because then you're out 75 to 150 points.
Yeah. And that starts to hurt quick.
It very quickly.
Yeah. For weapons comparison, like the chainsword, beautiful, chef's kiss, amazing. We've talked about it at length already. It really shines with assault intercessors. It This is where it belongs.
It is. And assault intercessors were made for the chainsword, and the chainsword was made for assault
Yeah.
intercessors. It's a match made in heaven. Like they bring so many attacks to the table with weight of dice. You're gonna do so much. You're gonna absolutely delete infantry. Like if I ran a 20 block of guardsmen into a 10 block of assault intercessors, I would just pick up the squad of guardsmen because they
Yeah.
wouldn't live. They would just
Yeah.
get pasted.
You'd maybe, if you were really lucky, have like 2 left.
Well, because think about it, you've got 50 attacks.
Mhm.
Let's just say, for sake of this argument, they're not the at the moment target.
Okay. Yeah.
So 50 attacks to hit, you've got 3 ups.
Mhm.
So you're going to hit probably 35 of them.
Yep.
To wound, and let's not assume that this is the normal assault intercessors. Let's assume jump pack.
Okay.
So that, they've killed 4 on the charge already.
Okay.
So you've got 35 hits. You're wounding on threes, so you're probably down to like 27 wounds. They're AP1, so the guardsman who has a 5 up save is on sixes now, and there's only 16 of them left from the charge.
Yeah.
You're not gonna roll 7 6s to have one left, like unless something astronomically crazy happens. Like
You never know.
the block of 20 guardsmen, I wouldn't even say the commissar survives if he's with them. Like
Yeah.
I think that in general,
Crazier things have happened, but
this is true.
odds are against you in that situation.
Exactly. I think
Definitely.
that they blend so well against infantry, and they even do well against tougher targets. Like I said, I've lost armigers in my knights army
Oh yeah.
just in one turn to assault intercessors coming in and absolutely cleaning up.
Yeah. Weight of dice is nothing to joke about.
It absolutely isn't.
Yeah. So the next weapon we're going to talk about, Power Fist. We've talked about this already. It's a one-off, but we still know it. We still love it. It does what Power Fists do,
Mm-hmm.
and it hits like a truck. It does what it's meant to do in the lore.
Mm-hmm.
It just, the fact that it is a one-off, similar to the other weapons we're going to talk about here, they're like, eh, you know,
Yeah, it's
it's
but
good utility. It makes sense. Most importantly, I think it allows for the sergeant to feel like an actual sergeant from the lore. It gives them
exactly.
that one up on the rest of the squad, makes them feel like they are the more powerful, the most powerful member of the squad.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I think I personally am always going to take a power fist or a thunderhammer if
Yeah.
I'm bringing a special weapon. If I have access to the heavier weapon, I'm going to bring it
Yeah, I do too.
because it has the potential to do more damage. Doesn't necessarily mean it will,
Mhm.
but I mean, 5 chainsword attacks at 1 damage can do a maximum of 5 damage, but
Yeah.
3 power fist or thunderhammer attacks that can each do 2 damage can still do 6.
Yeah.
Like it, you do still have a higher potential for damage, and I think that's why personally I'm always bringing one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Whereas like the power weapon,
I don't think I've ever purposefully brought a power weapon.
yeah, it gets overshadowed by the other options. It's not as good. It can shred infantry, but it's
Yeah,
iffy compared to the other two. It doesn't have as much utility. Like in my mind, I always am worried about vehicles and like high toughness things, so I'm always going to try and bring, even if it's a one off, something that can try and do some damage, which is where the power fist and the thunderhammer come in. For me.
exactly. Well, and then that's the nice thing about the power fist and thunderhammer over the power weapon is that the power weapon can't really handle infant. Well, it can handle infantry pretty well,
Yeah.
but it still can't handle them as effectively as a power fist or thunderhammer.
No.
Like the power fist or the thunderhammer are going to be wounding on 2s against infantry
Yeah.
if you like absolutely have to send it into them. So they don't have as many attacks, but they still do its job better than the power weapon, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. And with all these options, like to me, they do fit the lore versus tabletop well. Like with the exception of that power weapon. Like, but it's not off by much.
No.
It's one of those things where your sergeant is the only one carrying this. So it's like a symbol of, hey, this is the leader. They have the really cool heavy weapon. They're gonna do some damage. But in the grand scheme of things, you're more focused on the entire squad messing things up, which fits the lore. They work as
Yeah.
one big unit together.
I don't know what it would take to make the power weapon as lore accurate as we'd hope. I think just not trading off the number of attacks might help.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know. Like, it's just, to me, it's always a weird one because you see the power weapon on the cover of so many box arts, books, games, everything. Like, it's always a big space marine holding a power sword or something.
Yeah.
And it just never quite feels like it's as impactful as we're led to believe.
Well, and I think the big thing is every time I read about a power sword, it's generally being talked about as more of like a duelist's weapon.
Yeah.
It's something that's faster, it's something that's more elegant, which feels weird that it has fewer attacks than the chainsword, which is the brute force rip and tear
Yeah.
weapon. So I almost wonder if, like, as much as I love the chainsword having 5 attacks, I wonder if it would have been more lore accurate to have them switched. where the power weapon had 5 and the chainsword had 4.
Well, like when you look at the chainsword, like to me, it makes sense that it has
Yeah,
lots of attacks because you're hacking and slashing.
I
You're
agree.
not putting in the thought of, parry this, slash there, slice there, as you would with a power weapon. It's more of a finesse type weapon
Yeah,
where it just feels like I agree it should have more attacks because you would be moving quickly as a duelist, but I don't think the chainsword should lose attacks
I don't.
because
I that was mostly just a
oh, of
hypothetical.
course, of
Like,
course.
I think the chainsword is sitting perfectly where it's at.
Yes, it's our precious baby. Don't touch it. Don't change it.
Exactly. But like the you see things like the power fist being dropped down to 3 attacks because it's so much slower.
Yeah.
It would make sense that the power sword would have more attacks because it's faster. Like that feels like it
Yeah.
tracks to me, but it doesn't feel like it follows from the tabletop to the lore.
Yeah. I think it should have the same amount of attacks as the chainsword.
At least as a minimum.
Yeah, if not more. But the chainsword should also be fast.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where, we're getting very hypothetical, but if you bump the power weapon up to 6 attacks, that feels like it's moving quick. It's doing
Oh,
a
it
lot of
does.
work.
But it's also
And
probably a little too much.
yeah, so
I don't know exactly what it would take, but like I think what they were trying to do is I think that this is like how a normal space marine would be using it.
mhm,
Whereas when you look at a power weapon that's equipped by like a lieutenant or a captain, they do have more attacks.
yeah,
Like I think the captain with a power weapon has 6 attacks or something like that.
yeah.
So
Well, wasn't it and I might be so off base here. In ninth edition, the sergeant had separate stats than the rest of the squad.
he did, yeah.
So that is a big difference with 10th edition. The whole squad is just the squad,
Yeah.
and the weapon is the weapon. So that's probably part of where that comes from. And
Yeah.
I don't remember the ninth edition stat sheets and stuff, but I'm very hesitant to say go back to separating the sergeant because that just makes a lot more work
It
for
was
all of
very
us.
complicated.
But it's one of those things that's like it kind of does have a place. If it's supposed to be the veteran member of the squad that has access to the special things, they should be proficient and able to use them better than your average guy.
I would agree. I
So,
think that I agree. I think just the power sword for a standard intercessor being so much lower, it doesn't feel as right, but I think it's just one of those holdovers that
yeah,
we're moving away from.
yeah. So moving on from our ramble, uh, the abilities. Shock assault. It's amazing for helping wound like your tougher targets, which with chain swords, it's glorious. Like it's amazing.
It really takes them to a level above the
Oh
intercessors. Like
yeah,
we we didn't love the intercessors squad. It kind of felt
they fell a bit short.
they fell very short. These, though, when you combine their abilities with the mass amounts of chain swords,
Hmm.
they feel like they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean this ability in particular, their whole thing is go take objective from that thing over there. We don't want it to have that, so we're gonna make it ours. And here's a chainsword. Have fun. Uh, make them disappear. And now you're rolling 50 dice and making things disappear. It is very like purposefully designed, and
It
it
is.
works really well.
And especially when you pair it with Oath of Moment and you're on an objective and you have full rerolls, it harkens back to when Space Marines at the start of 10th edition had full rerolls for Oath of Moment.
Yeah.
And it's just, oh, I I never played Space Marines when they had the full rerolls because they changed it pretty quick when
Yeah.
the balanced data slate came out. That was right after the launch. But I was painting them and I was so excited, and then they took that away from me. This is the closest I'll ever get, apart from running a first company task force and having one turn where I get full of the moment rerolls.
GW wronged you.
They didn't wrong me. They made the right decision. Oh, the moment was way too powerful as it was, and it's still very powerful.
Oh yeah.
Especially with something like this, if you can give them sustained hits or lethal
Mm.
hits, because then you can go fishing for sixes and get a lot of utility out of 10 chain swords.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really feels like this on the tabletop matches the lore. Like in my mind, I picture You're throwing your assault intercessors into an objective to clear it out, and then the second it's clear, they're bumping off to the next objective and trying to clear that one while you have another unit come take the objective they were on.
Yeah.
Like their whole thing is just charge through the battlefield and open things up, and this allows them to do that so beautifully. The next ability, Hammer of Wrath, it's so nice. It's beautiful.
As good as Shock Assault is, Hammer of Wrath is just that much better, I think.
Yeah.
Because
it's free mortals.
It's free mortals. I mean, you're still, you need dice to do what dice do and not fail you. But, it's much better chance of getting wounds through
100%.
and just doing them straight away. There are units who have Feel No Pains Against Mortals. That does exist. But having the ability to just pound into a unit from a charge and deal, potentially 3, 4, 5 mortal wounds right off the bat, thin them out, it's really impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gives the utility against those larger targets like we talked about. It really, like, to me, it's the idea of your jump pack intercessors go up, they hover for a second, and they all crash down into something.
Yeah.
There's no way to defend against it. It feels like the things you read about in the books and you see in the games and the media. Like, it feels really, really good.
Well, and you have potential for 11 dice to get 4-ups on, which, if you roll average, you're going to get 6 mortals with that. And when I say 11, I mean you have a captain with them because they technically count as part of that unit.
Yep.
So they add an additional dice for your Hammer of Wrath.
Yeah.
And so you have the potential to do 5 mortal wounds just on average. I think it maxes out at 6. No, it does not max out at 6.
It doesn't?
It does not max out at 6. It is every 4-up.
I like this.
So
this scares me, though.
The potential for a unit of 10, assuming it hasn't been shot, assuming all the models are still there, you didn't lose the sergeant to an overcharge of your plasma gun, assuming all of those things, you charge in, you manage to get all 11 models with the captain into engagement range and do 11 dice, and every 4-up is a mortal. If you roll hot, you can get a lot of mortals.
You can just ruin things.
Yeah, most things like this max out at 6 mortal wounds.
Yeah.
These don't.
Yes.
At least as far as I can tell. There may be a balanced data slate thing that I'm not aware of. That is my disclaimer for this part of the episode. But being able to do that much work before you even attack, potentially killing something, a couple Terminators or something crazy like that, it is in the realm of possibility.
I'm scared.
I love Assault Intercessors. I've never played with them. I see them run a lot in competitive lists.
Oh, yeah.
When people are running an Intercessor variant, it is the Assault Intercessor for the most part.
Definitely. They just have so much more utility for the points.
Yeah. And from what I've seen, they're mostly the jump pack ones.
Yeah.
Just because they have that ability to move. At least in competitive lists, I don't see a lot of 10 blocks. I see a lot of 5 blocks. But when I play casually, I see a lot of 10 blocks. Because they're just cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they can really cause problems for people.
Yeah.
So I think it's about time we give these 2 units a score. What are we thinking?
I think these are the best units we've seen yet.
I almost agree. I think your jump pack Assault Intercessors, yes.
Okay.
I think your on-foot Assault Intercessors fall a little bit shorter than Terminators.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I think the Assault Terminators do a little bit better than the Assault Intercessors, just in terms of their relation to the lore. I think that if I give the jump pack Intercessors any less than a 9, I will be sad.
I'm going to give them an 8.95 just to annoy you.
Oh,
no, I'm kidding. They get a 9. I mean, we've been talking about it for this whole episode so far. They really, really match what they're supposed to do.
I almost want to put them up to a 9.5 because the only thing that I don't like about them is the armor. That's it.
Yeah,
but they make up for it with their movement.
Yeah, I mean, you can give them a 9.5. I'm gonna stay at a 9 for them.
Average 9.25.
Okay, sure. But yeah, they're amazing. I mean, they zoom around the battlefield. They bonk things. They hit like a truck. They're so much better than your normal assault intercessors, and they are really, really good. The only downside for me, and then you just mentioned it, the armor.
It just
Like,
doesn't stack.
it doesn't stack up. It doesn't feel like true Space Marine, like out of the lore. Like, yes, it is balanced for purposes of the game, but to me, that's a big one. Like, your Space Marine is supposed to feel invincible, super soldier, monster, in
Yeah.
armor that is terrifying. While they have a lot of things that make them terrifying, they can kind of just get shot out really quick.
Yeah.
If you're not careful with like your turn one movement before they can really jump into something, you're likely going to lose a few before you have a chance to let them do work.
Yeah. So one more thing that I do want to mention that we kind of forgot about until this point for the jump back intercessors is they do have deep strike.
9-5 it is.
The reason that I wanted to bring this up, because I forgot to write it in the show notes, was deep strike can really help get around kind of what you're talking about. You can keep them off the board for that first turn so that they may not get shot off. The only disadvantage with that is they do still have a 9-inch charge when they come on.
Yeah.
So you do have to still place them in cover and make sure that they can do what they need to do. But it kind of helps eliminate that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, deep strike is amazing. It allows. I mean, in that. Okay, let's unpack this because now you go back to looking at how they match up in the lore. When something that in the lore jumps out of a dropship as it's going down over the battlefield, they can land wherever on the battlefield. It doesn't matter. They're not necessarily going to be at the beginning of the fight, but they're going to be there at some point, and they don't care about a deployment zone.
Yeah.
They're showing up.
Well, and that's another reason that I do like deep strike specifically is because they
Yeah.
have the ability to choose where they go on the battlefield just by vectoring themselves with their jump packs.
Yep.
So jump pack intercessors having deep strike is huge for the lore aspect.
Oh yeah. 9-5.
9-5. I think that jump pack intercessors are the best that we've had just yet.
Yeah, I would agree.
The standard assault intercessors, though, I think they do fall a little bit short just because they don't have that extra movement to really make up for their lack of armor.
Well, and being an assault intercessor that's supposed to be super aggressive and gung ho and charging in, not having extra movement,
it hurts.
Yeah, 100%.
And they don't have a built-in advance and charge, which not a lot of things do have, but it feels like of anything, these would be something to have it. And the only way to get it for them is in detachments for Space Marines, such as the Gladius Task Force, to have advance and charge for your entire army for one turn, or spend a stratagem to give one unit advance and charge.
Yeah, and
it just
when you're spending CP for that, like it just doesn't feel.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel quite right.
It.
On the positive side, though, when they get in, they go to work, and that feels right. That feels good.
No, I agree. I don't want to say they're lacking shooting because they're assault intercessors. They're not really supposed to have a lot of shooting. But I personally like shooting a little bit more than melee, so I tend to feel a little bad when something only has pistols. That's my own personal bias. Yeah. But I have seen their heavy bolt pistols do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I can't discount them and say, oh, but they don't have shooting.
Yeah. I mean, even like as someone who plays with a Custodes army, like, yes, your whole point is to go in and become Golden Blender of Doom. However, there is a weapon built in to every spear that allows you to get a few pot shots off.
Yeah. Some
will get through, most won't. It's the same situation,
Exactly.
Like, if you can shoot really well and be absurdly good at melee, then you're just overpowered.
Yeah. And as a guard player, I also do have a hard time discounting low toughness shooting because I know how good 18 heavy stubber shots can be at stripping wounds off of a Transcendent Catan.
Yeah.
That was the only reason I played a game with my guard against a buddy of mine who had Necrons, and the only reason I was able to damage his Transcendent Catan at all, I put an entire Rogaldorn battle tank into this thing, and the only thing that did wounds were the heavy stubbers.
Oh my gosh.
And that was followed up by an entire Stormlord going into it. and that got
Oh my
another 2
gosh.
wounds through. So having those light plink shots can never be
Yeah,
discounted.
I mean, even if it's only a few dice, weight of dice does
Rolling dice is better than not rolling dice.
exactly. So, with our standard assault intercessors, they like the shooting, but they have a really good ability that's really nice, and they're cheaper than your standard intercessors, which
This
is
is true.
helpful. So, I want to put them at a 7 to a 7.5.
I think 7.5 is probably reasonable,
Yeah.
just because like their ability matches so well.
Yeah.
The only thing that I don't like about them is their movement
Mhm.
and their armor.
Yeah. Similar thing for like when we were talking about the jump pack assault intercessors. They're being a space marine, they should feel more invincible. We understand game balancing, makes sense. But the lack of movement or the lack of additional movement or a built-in advance and charge for your normal assault intercessors, that really hurts them.
Yeah, it feels bad.
It does.
And the fact that you have to rely on a detachment to really get them where they need to go, just it's
Yeah.
good, but it's not great, you know.
Yeah.
It prevents them from getting higher than an 8, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I think 7.5 is probably reasonable.
Yeah. So 7.5 for assault intercessors and a 9.5 for the jump pack.
And
assault
and that officially marks our new highest.
Woo! Party for them.
Yeah,
Yay. Go be violent somewhere.
I mean, they are the most aggressive, so it makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that concludes our discussion on these units.
Yeah, I have nothing else if you have nothing else. Just
Um,
before we go,
Yes.
I want to thank everyone who's been watching our channel. We've seen way more viewer count than we ever expected.
Mhm.
We really appreciate everything that you guys have brought to us. I mean, this episode alone was a recommendation from someone who commented on a previous video.
Yep.
So
And we'll put that person's name in right here so you guys can see it.
yes,
If you have any recommendations, please drop them in the comments and we can call you out, put you on blast for making us do things. No,
yeah,
we really have been enjoying this and we want to keep it going and seeing comments and people are enjoying what we're doing and having recommendations has been amazing. So thank you so much.
And on the note of recommendations, if you have other armies that you want us to talk about, I have typed so much about Space Marines that I'm starting to get a little burnt out on them. So please,
Yeah.
if you have other armies that are your favorite faction that you want us to do a little bit of a dive into, please let us know so that we can do so.
Yeah. I'm sure you noticed in this episode, if you watched our previous ones, we kind of skimmed over a lot of the weapons because they're all the same as the previous ones.
Yeah, we
But
definitely kept this one a little bit shorter because of that.
yeah.
But once again, if you have any recommendations, please don't hesitate to let us know. Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you around. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have a good one, everyone.